Having a quorum present, I'd like to open the City of Santa Barbara Planning Commission meeting. And Ms. Rodriguez, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Bartlett, absent. Commissioner White, absent. Commissioner Jacobs.
Here.
Commissioner Lodge.
Here.
Commissioner Thompson, absent. Commissioner Jostes.
Present.
Chair Larson.
Here. Thank you very much. Now, announcements or appeals, Mr. Cotto?
None, thank you.
None. Great. In this section of the meeting, we open for public comment. It must not be on any item now on the agenda. So if you have something to say about anything else, come on up and tell us. You have 2 minutes. You'll need to fill out a green slip afterwards. Not seeing anyone coming forward, I will close public comment and we'll get to our item at hand, Staff Hearing Officer Appeal. And this is an appeal of the decision of the Staff Hearing Officer for 617 Bradbury Avenue. So the way that we'll do this is we will have staff make a presentation, and then we have someone here from the ABR, Ms. Sherry, and she will come up and make her comments, and then we'll hear from the appellant and then the applicant. All right, thank you very much. And Mr. Cotto, you look poised to speak.
Ms. Suzanne Riegel will give the staff presentation.
Thank you very much. Ms. Riegel?
Good afternoon, Chair Larson and fellow commissioners. The project before you is a project at 617 Bradbury. It is a proposed demolition of an existing residence, construction of a 5,488 square foot, 3-story mixed-use building, which includes 2 residential units and 2 commercial units, and it has an on-grade parking structure, which has two car garages and 2 open spaces included inside of it. The discretionary approvals are a modification to allow the required common open area to be located in the front yard and or smaller than the required dimensions, and a tentative subdivision map for a 1-lot subdivision to create 2 residential and 2 commercial condominium units. The project is located between Ortega and Coda Street on Bradbury. The white arrow on the screen shows the location. It is located in the C2 zone and also in the Central Business District. The staff hearing officer reviewed the project on 2 occasions, on June 17th, and on the 17th it was continued to notice the modification that was not originally noticed, and again on July 15th was the approval of the project. The appellant's issues briefly are that the project is out of harmony with the surrounding neighborhood and that the modification approval should not have been granted. With regards to the modification, the private outdoor living space method, when you're doing multi-residential outdoor living space, requires 3 components. One of them is the 10% open area on the lot, which this project does meet. It is a private outdoor living space for each residential unit, which this meets and exceeds, and this common open area, which is an additional requirement that came into effect with revisions to the zoning ordinance in September of last year. The location of this modification is at the front, and you can see the red circle here. Specifically, the modification was granted to allow the open yard to be located in what the green box is up on the screen, and it eliminated what the applicant proposed in the red box, which is a walkway, from the common open area requirements. So in summary, staff recommends that you deny the appeal and approve the project, making the findings and subject to the conditions contained in the staff hearing officer resolution number 062-09, which is attached to your staff report as Exhibit A. And I believe that the applicant will actually do a presentation on the details of the project and elevations. And we have Dawn Sherry here from the ABR for questions.
And Ms. Sherry, thank you for coming today.
You're welcome. Sorry about my voice. I'm mainly here to answer questions, but I have been asked to speak specifically about possible issues that you might have with why the ABR could make a compatibility finding. So if you'd like, I can try to summarize the board's position on that and the number of people, why we had a split vote, why the project might have gone to the board more than one time, and why the board could have made the compatibility finding. Is that what you kind of want me to talk about?
If you could do so and just do it real briefly, that's great.
Okay.
Thank you.
There was one board member that never voted in favor of the project. The board was split somewhat, but the majority of the board felt that the compatibility findings could be made for several reasons. This is not a project that that has a sloped roof or in such a way that defines a cottage, traditional cottage style. That's true, but the board's position was that there were various different styles, examples of different styles in the neighborhood, thereby not dictating a specific style that this project should be. The project does have a flat roof. Flat roofs work better in green roof situations than a sloped roof. And the board was able to make the findings because the materiality of the project was a traditional materiality, and the applicant made a very good effort to incorporate materiality from adjacent structures and took examples of detailing and elements that brought in the spirit and the nature of the traditional detailing, but incorporated it in a creative, new way. In addition to that, there in the neighborhood are several larger buildings than this building. So the board in general felt that because of the scale of this project, as far as mass, bulk, and scale not exceeding all of the other buildings in the neighborhood, in addition to the materiality finding that the applicant worked really well over 3 different meetings in order to bring the scale down comfortably for the board to, in order for the board to make the findings. I myself wasn't comfortable with the scale at the beginning, but this was a classic example, in my opinion, of an applicant working with the board's concerns about, it's what makes this process work, in my opinion. The board worked to bring the project down to scale and really bring the walls of the second story in and worked with getting privacy for those balconies. I don't think the project had to be voted unanimously for it to be an improvable project, but that's really all I have to say for now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions for Ms. Sherry? Ms. Lodge?
Madam Chair, thank you. When you say materiality, I assume you mean that it's using materials like or similar to the ones that are used on other buildings in the neighborhood.
Yes.
Okay. And, well, I'll wait to see the applicant's presentation.
Yeah, you should see the elevations.
I don't, we do have the elevations, but, okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks very much. Thank you for coming today. All right. Now we will hear from the appellant. Please. Good. Come up and introduce yourself, please.
We do have one other speaker who came along.
You have about 15 minutes, so.
Oh, I won't take that long
Okay.
because other people will need it.
Well, we'll have a public hearing as well.
Yeah. Okay. I am Wanda Livernoy, 533 Brinkerhoff, and I do have a few things to read, so we'll do our best to get underneath the 15 minutes. Now, one thing I would like you to see are the number of people who are here. I don't want everybody to have to get up, but if you are with me.
Well, excuse me,
Can we do that?
we can't do that because it's, you know, they can fill out a public comment
Okay.
slip and come up
All
and
right.
say they agree with you.
All right.
But
Well-
the camera isn't able to pan the room for
And
public
well,
purposes.
okay.
We can't
I
do that.
understand. That's
Thank you.
okay. Anyway, here we are, neighbors, opposed to this project. Why are we opposed to this project? Because it's too big. They're just trying to do too much on the land, you know? The appeal focuses on one of our municipal codes, 2821081A, the lack of adequate outdoor living space. One of the requirements is that it have a 15 by 15 open space. And, you know, it's the intent of all of those provisions is to provide relief from building volume, driveways, parking, and beyond. That's what we're trying to do, especially when there are no setbacks. Now, I do have this model. Now, this is not a dollhouse. The windows don't open, the stairs aren't there, but this shows you how big it could be. Dark lot lines. This is the next door property. I want to make sure I get it right here. There we go. Good. In the findings, the staff officer, and I quote, "The modification is consistent with purposes and intent of the zoning ordinance and is necessary to secure an appropriate improvement on the lot," etc. What's an appropriate improvement?
We'll just put it by each other.
You know, what is the evidence that we have to do this kind of thing? You know? Continuing on with the findings, the C3, the proposed development is consistent with the principles of sound community planning and will not have an adverse impact upon the neighborhood's aesthetics. Well, it's going to have a real big input on that little house next door, and it's going to have a big impact on at least 3 properties on De La Vina. De La Vina 614, 618, and 622. The findings continue that the design has been reviewed by the Architectural Board of Review, which found the architecture and the site design appropriate. I would suggest that the Planning Commission review those videos of the ABR meetings. There is a discrepancy between the videos and the minutes and what finally gets published. Caroline Vassallo noted that at the last ABR hearing on June 17th, there were 3 ABR members who voiced major problems with the proposed project size, bulk, and design. Their concerns were not reflected in the findings only because they were reminded that they'd approved an earlier minimization of mass, bulk, and scale, and so they could not reverse or even address the issues still of concern. Now, the Architectural Board of Review is charged with a responsibility for the protection and preservation, as nearly as is practicable, of the natural charm and beauty of the area in which the city is located and the historical style, qualities, and characteristics of building structures and architectural features associated with and established by its long, illustrious, and distinguished past. There are 5 general guidelines: complement architecture, provide outdoor privacy areas, provide screening for undesirable views, provide usable and functional open space. And I think I would look at the definition for front yard, because each building is supposed to have a front yard, and I don't think your open space is supposed to be in the front yard. So I would check that also. And there are a number of people who will speak, and we have a couple of letters. Is Theone here by any chance? No, she had a doctor's appointment.
We'll actually have the letters during our public comment.
Well, she just mailed me this one.
Oh.
You might not have it in your packet. It's not long. I may not be able to attend the hearing at 1 p.m. September 17th, but would like to go on record in support of the appeal filed by Wanda Livernoy, and to express my opposition to the above referenced project. I have been opposed to this project since I first learned of it. She's been to several meetings. She's been to several. It is incompatible with the character of the neighborhood, raises issue of privacy, not only visual privacy, but sound privacy. There were several people who said to me, you know, when you're too close, when the buildings are too close, you hear everything. It is out of all proportion to the surrounding properties. The introduction of a 3-story, 400 square foot development on a 5,000 square foot lot with any, if any, setback is inappropriate. It would destroy the character of an old Santa Barbara neighborhood. Okay?
Would you please pass that letter to our secretary so she can enter it in the record? Thank you.
Here you go. This is from Karen McFadden.
Oh, please don't read any more letters though, because it's really, that puts us out of order badly.
Okay. All right. That's it.
Thank you. You can submit the letters. We should have them in our correspondence packets, and
I think I gave some to Suzanne.
and
she'll-
we'll thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. And we appreciate your brevity. And now we'll hear from the applicant, and then I'll open the public hearing. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Clay Arell. I'm the architect for the project. I'm with AB Design Studio, representing the owner here, David Lack. How much time do I have?
15 minutes.
Perfect. I'm just going to move this over. Can we swap?
Took 6. She had 15. Right. Have to read the letters.
Great. Well, Madam Commissioner, Madam Chair and Commissioners, thanks for being here, and thanks for coming to the site visit the other day. I want to begin a little bit by talking about the project. We're here today on an appeal of a modification that was granted on this project by the staff hearing officer. That modification was for the common open area requirement to be located in the front of the project. That's the modification that was requested at a very late date in the project. It came about because of a distinction which Wanda actually referred to called front yard. And front yard is a new distinction under the new ordinance that satisfies or that requires the 15 by 15 common open space. And front yard is, as we're learning in the city, is basically anything from the front building forward. And it also includes stepping, if the building steps back, then it's the area from the next part of the building back from the property line. So this whole area would be front yard, that whole area in front would be front yard. There's no requirement in the zoning ordinance for us to have any sort of front yard in this project. There's a requirement to have common open space, and that common open space is not supposed to be located in the front yard. However, on this project, we've required a modification for just that, and I'll explain to you why we did that. I wanted to comment briefly. If you look at this rendering here, this is from the street. Here's the sidewalk. Our building is actually set back 3.5 feet here. It's set back much further here. Our building is set back 2 feet on the ground, 2.5 feet on the ground floor on both sides of the property. So when I look at the model in front of us, it's very much not representative of what we've designed. And I'll show you more of the drawings. This building, this model that's here is actually indicating that the building is at the property line and goes straight up. It does not. It actually steps back quite a bit on these sides. And I'll get into more of that later. The property that I'm trying to get this thing to work here. There we go. This is what the property was. There was a duplex on here that was removed before Mr. Lack purchased the property. There was drug activity happening on this site. There was obviously other zoning violations going on and things of that nature. They've cleaned it up, and we're really trying to improve this property and thus improve the neighborhood. We have been in the process for about 2.5 years on this project and worked really closely with ABR on various issues. the ABR told us to make it shorter. We made it shorter. They told us to bring the setbacks in at the ground floor. We did. They told us to reduce the mass. We did that. We're doing 8-foot plates on the building. It's a very tightly designed building, and it's under 30 feet. And if I know you're all aware of Measure B coming up. Our site is a 60-foot site, and under Measure B would be 40 feet, and we're still under that. So we're also in a C2 zone, which means we don't have to have any setbacks. However, we have set the building back considerably all the way around the project, including the front and including both sides. As you move up the building, I'm going to get to this in a second. As you move up the building, it does set back as well. This is our area. Here's our site, this blue one right here. EPV is obvious. We all know where that is. That's here. It actually includes the back of the Frazee building. Brinkerhoff sits in this region and includes the buildings on the corner here of, that's Coda, and this is De La Vina and Bradbury. That's the Brinkerhoff district. Our site actually is not in either. However, it is close. Our earlier designs of the project, we were going a little bit more modern Spanish style, and so we did more stucco and whatnot. ABR said, no, come back with something that's a little more indicative of other buildings on the street. And we did do that, and I'll show you some of that as well. But our project is not within either district. And there's a reason why the buildings on this side of Bradbury are not included, because they're falling apart. And a lot of them are run down, and they haven't been well kept. Here's a site plan, our landscape site plan. This actually indicates our outdoor area here, which we feel is appropriate to our site. This is the area that we're asking for the modification. We feel this is really valuable to both the tenants and the commercial tenants. As Wanda indicated earlier, we need to provide, how did she put it, usable and functional outdoor space. That is usable and functional by all of the people who are going to use this building, and that's why we've chosen that. And we specifically didn't put it on an upper level because it wouldn't be usable by every party. You can see from this that we have a long hedge along this side and 2-foot setback along there. We're set back in the back, and we have a narrow swath of land that's about 2.5 feet long, 2.5 feet wide between our property here and the neighboring property behind us. That piece of land is going to be a quiet title for the property owner. It's just a leftover piece of land from years gone. We're set back along the south side as well, all the way forward, and we have a permeable driveway here. And we're doing a lot of water retention on site. What's unique about this building is it has 2 landscape plans. It has its landscape plan at the site, and it has a landscape plan at the roof, which is very rare. This project is incorporating several green concepts, including over 750 square feet of solar panels up on the top roof here. We have green roofs located all throughout the building. As you can see, this is the line of the upper floor. As it steps back, we're using parts of the parking podium below to capture rainwater, to put plantings, and to really green up the building. Our design for water retention and water filtration is that water that collects on the upper roofs spills down into a planter, it gets filtered, it spills down again, it gets filtered, and it goes down to the site. By the time it gets to the site, it's not only been reduced, but it's clean, and everything's maintained on our property. These are some sketch renderings of the landscaping as you see it. This is looking from the site to the north of us. There's an existing hedge here. Here's the sidewalk and the street tree. This is what it looks like without the hedge. Here's the gigantic palm tree that's on our property, and here's the building. And you can see how the building sets back off the street here, continues to set back, steps up, and starts to step up a little bit. So at this point, you're about 45 feet back on a 100-foot lot. This is a street view with the street trees in, the building behind it, and the landscaping in the front. Here's the same view without the trees. And then here's a little side view on the other side. Here's our site plan, which you have seen before from staff. There's the area that we've been talking about. I'm not going to spend much time on this because Suzanne already covered a lot of it. One of the things we did with ABR is we put the commercial entrance off the sidewalk because we knew that was, the board felt that it would look better if we did that and really address the streetscape, and that's one of the changes we made with ABR. Again, here's the project. Here's that entry I was just mentioning, right along here. And then this walks back into the back to the stairs so you can get up to the units. And there's an elevator here for ADA access. I want to talk a little bit about architecture. And Commissioner Lodge, you had a question about this earlier to Dawn from ABR. This is a project that's adjacent. This is a building adjacent to the Frazee building. This was our influence, if you will, or where we looked to gain reference on our street, on Bradbury Avenue. This project is a multifamily use. It has a tall 2-story building in the back. They're small little bungalows. They have flat roofs. They have siding and trim, and they're very kind of quaint, and they're nice. They're nice projects. We looked to this when the board gave us direction to look at the neighborhood and do something a little bit more compatible in terms of materiality. This is where we went. So if I go back a slide, you can see the window proportions are very similar. We've got siding in there. Things are scaled down. We've got trim pieces and things that relate to that kind of architecture. Is it exactly the same? No, it is not. Is it a little bit more forward-thinking? Sure, it is. And there's reasons for that too, because we don't want to do something that was an exact replica of something on the street. We want to actually do something that's referencing it. Here's our side elevation. As you can see, here's the property line. Here's the person standing there, and here's the street. Our building is set back 3.5, 4 feet right here, and the building continues to set back. It doesn't get to 2-story till back here, which is almost halfway back on the lot. This is a loft space for the 2 units, and it's not full height. It's a height and a half. And then the building steps up a little bit, and this is the roof where we're trying to hide all of our solar panels. That's why it's flat, and it has a parapet. This part of the building here on this side elevation, which is not reflected in this model, is set back from the property line 5 feet. This portion of the building here that you see is set back from the property line 7.5 feet. So this model does not reflect what we're designing, and we spent a lot of time with ABR and a lot of time with our client to really make sure that this building steps back. As you can see back here, there's a taller element at the corner, and then the back actually steps back. Here's the rear property line, and here's our upper floor that steps back about 7 feet. So we're not built out property line to property line. Here's the view from the other side. It's very much the same kind of architecture. We've got some of the siding materials, some of the similar types of massings of windows, and then we have the walls along the property line. So the only wall along the property line that's close to the property line is only sitting at about 12 feet, 11 or 12 feet here is what you would see, similar to any other building that would be built close to the property. Here's our site plan again. I won't go through that anymore. Here's our upper floor, and this is where I wanted to point out how the building sets back. As you can see, we're set back here and around the front and around here, and we're set back minimally in the back, but we want to borrow the space that we have. These are all planters along here. This planter we added for when we met with ABR. They wanted us to create a buffer from this balcony to the neighbors, so we created a planting situation that would help buffer that. The building steps back. It's stepped back here 2.5 feet. It steps back to 5 feet, steps back to 7 feet, back to 5 feet, and then this is just a balcony here. And this is where our private outdoor living space is. We're required to have 84 square feet. With this balcony, and that balcony, and this balcony, we're at 254 square feet for our unit. So another requirement that Wanda brought up is we have to provide ample outdoor living space. We've tripled the requirement for private outdoor living space on that unit, on both units. This is the entry procession for the 2 units coming in this way, and the stairs that come up from below, an elevator access, and here's the other commercial space with a green roof on top. Next slide is the upper floor. Here's the loft space. So as you come up the stairs from below, you have a loft looking down, and so you get some height in there. Because we have 8-foot plates throughout the building, we wanted to have a little area that gave you a little bit of height and make you feel like you're in a bigger space that it really isn't. As we see from the back, this is set back about 7 feet. We have garden planters to collect rainwater to spill down to the lower planters. This again is 5 feet here, 7 feet, 5, and then this comes across like this, and that does the same thing on both sides. And then the roof plan, which we saw earlier, a rendered roof plan, but here's just indicating all the solar, and you kind of see how the different roof planes are laying out. The modification, so I want the open space, there's 3 issues for open space which were brought up. First is 10% of the lot. That's 500 square feet. We're about 750 total. So we've done our job. We're 150% of the requirement. The private outdoor living space, we're required to have 84 per unit. We have 254 per unit. Common open area, we're required to have a 15 by 15 spot, which is 225 square feet. We have more than that. We said 351 because we included the walkway, but even without that, we're at 280. So we're still over and above on all outdoor areas required by the zoning. The real benefit of this project, or at least from what I can tell, or at least what we're talking about on here, is that the owner and myself are both LEED accredited professionals. We want this building to be LEED Platinum. We want it to participate in Built Green Santa Barbara. We want it to be a leader in the community moving forward as we talk about how to build sustainability into our projects, how to be green, how to reduce the impact on the environment, and all those things that we're all talking about, we're all excited about. That's what this project does. That's why there's flat roofs. That's why there's massing the way it is. It's only 1,500 square feet per unit, which is not a lot. We've got ample parking on site. We've actually provided more than we're required. And the reason we did that is because we didn't want to impact the street. The street right now is severely stressed when it comes to parking. It's really hard to find parking on that street. And so we have included a couple more spaces than what we actually need to for the zone of benefit. I want to talk a little bit about
Your time. You have about 1 more minute.
1 more minute? Okay. I'll be brief, and then I want the owner to come up. This is Brinkerhoff. Brinkerhoff is cute, charming, quaint, wide streets, nice tall palm trees, all buildings set back. This is Bradbury. It's not the same street. So I'm requesting that you actually look at it as a unique street. Thank you.
Thank you. So please observe that we don't have much.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I'm just
You used a
be
lot
real
of your
brief.
time, so.
I just want to say
Thank
that
you.
I'm David Lack, and I'm actually the owner of the property, one of the owners. And I've been a 23-year resident here in Santa Barbara. And I'm a green builder. I build a lot of green buildings, actually around the country and throughout the state. This is my first one here. Will be in Santa Barbara. And actually, I just want to tell you, this is actually going to be my home. It's going to be a model showcase. And I told the architect, I actually had a previous architect that was working on it before, and they didn't get along with the city too well. And I told my architect, I said, work with the city with all the general plans, everything we need to do to make this project go through. And I'm very happy, and I'm very happy with the staff and the ABR and Show and Dart and everybody. You know, I might have growled a little bit along the way, but, you know, but we worked out. We made a deal, and we worked out a nice system. I don't live in Brinkerhoff. It's not Brinkerhoff district. If I wanted to live in Brinkerhoff or build a cottage like that, I would have bought a house there. But I wanted to live downtown. I go to the athletic club. I work out. I want to walk around. I want to get an electric car. They're all going to plug in there. It's going to be, you know, a full sustainable building. It's, you know, it will fit in the neighborhood. I'll be a good neighbor, you know, and I just don't want to live in Brinkerhoff, and people say this belongs in the funk zone. I don't want to live in the funk zone. I like the area. I searched the whole place, and I was going to buy a condo downtown, and I couldn't find the right thing, so I looked at this property, and I kind of rescued it. So I just want to give you this here, and I think you saw it earlier, what I rescued it from. It had violations all over the place. I said, clean up the violations. I got a renter in there. It's our construction yard right now, but I think I'm going to build a nice project, and you'll all be happy about it. And I'm going to live there, and it's going to be a nice model showcase for Santa Barbara. So thank you. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, what's the picture that's up on the screen now?
Can I explain it?
I'm curious. Are we going to hear what that is, or is it an accident?
Thumb through. I didn't want to disrupt, so I was trying to thumb.
Oh, it's a survey of the neighborhood?
That's a house on Bradbury with duct tape holding it up.
Okay, so we made the site visit, so we're aware of those conditions.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Now we'll open the public comment. We're circulating these photos as we're working here. So I will call anybody else need to fill out a green slip, please do so now and give it to Mr. Cato, and he will give it to me. And we have a number of letters. I didn't intend for it to look as though I cut off the appellant, but we have a lot of letters, and I want to make sure that the names go in the record, and so we have read the public the correspondence we've received. So I'll call your name, and I'll call the name to follow. So if that person would please be ready to speak, that would be good. So first we'll have Paul Zink, followed by Bill Mahan. 2 minutes, please.
Can you pass this up for them to take a look at? Hello, my name is Paul Zink, and I'm on the ABR. And as the applicant said, it was we struggled with this project. We struggled a lot from day one, and we as the board are not in full agreement of what is being presented and what was voted on. What I'm passing out today, or right now, is a figure-ground relationship that shows what would be a building that was basically built to the property lines versus the rest of the Brinkerhoff area. And it's rest of the area from the Brinkerhoff Street to the 101 freeway. If you look at the setbacks and you understand what the neighborhood context is, it is true across the street. You have the Frazee building, and then you have the Dudak building. And those are built property line to property line. And maybe those are considered harsh edges to what was a residential neighborhood. And this building that's being proposed is a harsh edge. Our board has had a lot of conversations about the actual program, the size of the structure. We haven't had concerns about the architecture or the LEED certified and the Bill Green and the solar and all that kind of stuff. Those are all things that are commendable. But what I want to point out is that the modification that's being requested is basically a justification for the size of the program that the applicant is asking for. And we have struggled with the lot line to lot line proposal that's being put here. 12-foot parapet or 12-foot walls around the first floor, that's going to be fairly harsh to the adjacent neighbors. It's true, it might be 12 inches from the property line or maybe 18 inches. For all practical purposes, it's lot line to lot line. So the board is very divided on this project, and it needs additional refinement and work.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Zink. Bill Mahan, please, followed by Joan Livingston.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission.
Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be back. I'm here to support the appeal and to present to you what I think is where the staff hearing officer failed to make the appropriate finding, and this would be C. This would be the new condominium development C3, where it says the proposed development is consistent with the principles of sound community planning and will not have an adverse impact upon neighborhood aesthetics. I don't think that finding can be made in terms of this particular design, and I'm going to the urban design guidelines, which I know the Planning Commission had a very strong hand in writing, and number one, compatibility of new development with the existing environment. And the first paragraph says, design development to complement and enhance the character of Santa Barbara, the surrounding neighborhood, enhance the surrounding neighborhood, and existing adjacent developments. And then it goes over and it says generally, this is giving you the rules for how you define compatibility. Generally, proposed development should demonstrate compatibility on 3 different levels. The development should be compatible with the distinctive architectural character of Santa Barbara. It'd be distinctive down in Santa Monica. I don't think it's distinctive for Santa Barbara. The development should be compatible with the character of the surrounding neighborhood. Absolutely, this is not true. This is not compatible with the surrounding neighborhood because Brinkerhoff and the Redwood Inn, which is a part of Brinkerhoff, is only 50 feet away from this building. These are 1- and 2-story buildings that have front yards, side yards, backyards, sloped roofs. They're beautiful, charming, human scale kind of buildings. This particular piece of architecture does not fit that criteria. The third one is the development should be compatible with the immediate adjacent developments. It is not. So I don't see how the staff hearing officer could make the finding for approving aesthetics when the urban design guidelines so specifically points out how those should be done. And I go back to you again and say Brinkerhoff, which is a historic district, has a very, very special character. This is a green giant, and it will never fit in to the Brinkerhoff character. To the whole block on Bradbury, all the way around Delavina, every other single building is a little craftsman-style building that has front yards, side yards, etc. You know, a little home. This is a blockbuster, and it's wrong to approve that. So I hope that you will support the appeal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mahan. Joan Livingston, followed by Jeannie Carey. Thanks.
Hi, Joan Livingston, and I'm here speaking on behalf of Allied Neighborhood Association, and I believe you got a letter. I'm hoping you did because I don't have copies of it from Judy Arias. And Allied Neighborhood Association takes 2 points. One, that we don't feel that the modification grant was justified under the code. It was a excessive grant of authority by the modification officer, so we're urging that you deny that modification in the appeal as the appeal recommends, and that also the grounds of neighborhood compatibility just simply were not met by any stretch of any criteria that's out there. So that's officially from Allied Neighborhood Association, and I'd like to amplify that now from my own personal perspective. I was a charter member of the West Side Study Group, and I was the chairperson for a number of years. We met for probably over 10 years dealing with West Side development issues. I own property. I lived in the West Downtown, and I was also part of the Chapala Visioning Group. I also supported Paseo Chapala when it was first presented. So I'm not somebody who just automatically says no to development, but I do have a very, very intimate knowledge of the West Downtown, and we appreciate the idea that it's a place where you can have mixed use, a little more urbanization down in that area. But this project is so out of scale, so out of character with everything that the West Downtown stands for historically and hopefully for the future, that I hope you will support the appeal. This needs to go back to square one. It's just a design that doesn't have any place. And one of the reasons I say that is because I really know every block in this area. And probably in the 1950s or 60s, there was an invasion into this area by what I would call boxcar apartment buildings. They're just long, narrow tubes. They're stucco. They're pushed out to about a 10-foot setback. They have usually cute little names in front of them, and they have a row of carports in the back and a paved asphalt. And they're sitting in between craftsman homes, Victorian homes, a lovely historic mix of old architecture that really was the character of Santa Barbara. That invasion we're stuck with now forever. And I see this being coattailed by being called green, but it's just a trendy gimmick, and it doesn't belong. And I hope you can look to the design guidelines that the Housing Authority, who put in a number of larger developments into this area, but they did there with sensitivity and sensibility. So
thank you.
I support the appeal.
Thank you very much. Jeannie Carey, followed by Mafani Learned.
I'm Jean Carey, and I live at 532 Brinkerhoff Avenue, 1 block from this proposed building at 617 Bradbury Avenue. We bought our old Victorian in 1957, and it's made a lovely home in a great neighborhood, including Bradbury, for us for many years. But I'm very concerned and confused with this building you are considering approving on Bradbury in my adjacent neighborhood. I know that according to ordinance number 5464 on project compatibility analysis, you are to see that the design is, quote, compatible with the distinctive characteristics of the particular neighborhood surrounding the project, unquote. This flat-roofed building looks nothing at all like the older homes surrounding it. It is not compatible. It may have a flat roof across the street for a Chapala building, but the rest of Bradbury does not. You are to check for, quote, appropriate size, mass, bulk, height, and scale, unquote. This flat-roofed square building fills the whole lot with no room for much of a setback on any of its four sides. Why approve such bulk and scale so opposed to the rest of the buildings surrounding it? You are also to check its, quote, sensitivity to adjacent landmarks and historical resources, unquote. Our Brinkerhoff Landmark District is right next to this building. The neighbors I have spoken with and I see no reason for this design of flat roof rectangular squares be placed in this location. It is not sensitive to our adjacent landmarks and historical resources. Please reconsider the neighborhood appearances and the neighbors' feelings and place this building, which has many good qualities, somewhere else more compatible for its design. Thank you from my concerned neighbor.
Thank you very much. Mafanwi Learned, followed by Michael Terry.
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
My name is Mavanwi Learned. You can call me Barney.
Thank you.
I was born and raised in Santa Barbara. Grew up in the house at 136 West Coda Street. It was my family home. I used to ride around the block in my bicycle. I now run my business out of that piece of property. It's a mixed-use, beautiful two-story Victorian historical house. And I am very opposed to the whole project, support Wanda's appeal, and I very much agree with the lady, I didn't get her name, I'm sorry, in the black sweater there, but I really feel that this should be taken back to square one. The only two flat roof places that I can see around there is the little one story you showed and Frazee. It's just, you're building this monstrosity of a, you know, I appreciate the green building and all that and keeping in within the environment. But, you know, we're talking about a beautiful, historical, charming neighborhood. And I just hate to see Santa Barbara change so quickly. I always thought Santa Barbara was low growth. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just see it changing so quickly. And it just, I think this building should be re-looked at and completely redesigned, basically. I don't think it fits in at all. And you know, it's funny because just a few months ago, I wanted to put some new trees in front of the Victorian house that I have on Coda. Came to the city, went and saw Tim Downing, who I had to see, and he told me to plant 2 trees. I had to stay within keeping of the designated tree for the area, which went within about a 4 or 5 block radius, which was this big, huge pine-looking tree. Needless to say, I haven't planted anything. But is that in keeping? And we're talking about a tree versus a building? I mean, you know, that's just, to me, I think it's absurd. And I really hope that you could reconsider the whole building. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Michael Terry, followed by Marcy Woolfolk.
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Chairman and members of the Commission. My name is Michael Terry. I live at 536 Brinkerhoff, right on the corner of Coda, and I look on the, my view north is Bradbury. So I've been asked to also speak on behalf of Caroline Vassallo, who cannot be here. She has written a letter. I won't read the whole letter. I'll read a couple of highlights, if I may, just to cover her concerns. She starts with Brinkerhoff and Bradbury Avenues are quite different streets, but they do have some major similarities. Both are 1 block long, relatively narrow, have a close proximity to downtown, fall under C2 commercial residential zoning, and though Bradbury's Victorian craftsman bungalow quality has been minimized by the entry of 2 commercial buildings, both streets exhibit ample setbacks, a predominance of peaked roofs, and an overall dominance of the Victorian craftsman cottage or bungalow architecture. Much of this has been said. I think one earlier comment I'd like to underscore, and that is that this building would be a blockbuster. And that's an interesting phrase and a very nice double entendre for me, because that's the concern of those of us in the surrounding neighborhood, is that this creates a new direction for what's going to happen on that entire block. And while we all admit, and in fact are not unhappy with the fact that Bradbury and Brinkerhoff are different, that doesn't mean that Bradbury does not have a charm and a beauty of its own and represents an entire block of this city that this kind of construction could lead in a direction that would not be compatible with any of the surrounding neighborhoods. As Mrs. Vassallo says in her letter, which you have, Bradbury is different, but it has charm and a value. And yes, it has been somewhat tainted by the construction on Chapala, but the east side is very intact. And on the west side, the development would be a terrible first step to destroy what remains of Bradbury's charm. Bradbury really could be the beginning of something that, again, I endorse and support the greenness and the Leeds construction that they are working on in this, but it can be done in a more compatible way.
You have just a short time left.
Just want to comment on one thing on the amendments to Chapter 22.22, which has already been discussed briefly. It does require that the design be compatible with desirable architectural quality and characteristics which are distinctive of Santa Barbara and of particular neighborhoods surrounding the project. And also it speaks to size, mass, and bulk. Requires sensitivity to adjacent landmarks and historic resources. The Redwood Inn is immediately adjacent. Adjacent is described as next to or nearby, and this entire neighborhood is nearby, and we urge that this body protect both the resource and return consideration of this project for further review. Thank you.
Marcy Woolfolk, followed by Mary Louise Days. Welcome. Try and keep your comments to 2 minutes, please.
Yes. My name is Marcy Woolfolk, and I'm one of the property owners of 614 Dallavina Street, and this property has been in our family over 75 years. I just want to state, as everyone else has stated, that this 3-story building is just too much. The quaintness of the neighborhood will be lost forever if it's allowed to be built. The 3-story building will be towering over the adjacent properties. When you drive down Dallavina, or you'll see this huge building standing like the palm trees above everything else. And really, it just doesn't fit. And I hope that the committee right now has the opportunity to stop and reconsider the impact this project will have on our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mary Louise Days, followed by Tim Bynack.
Hi, Mary Louise Days, and I was instrumental in drafting the Landmark District Ordinance for Brinkerhoff Avenue Landmark District. Aside from, there is the fact, of course, that has been made by many of the previous speakers that the project is not compatible with these adjacent districts. I point out that this project property is within feet of 2 landmark districts, meaning design control districts, the El Pueblo Viejo and the Brinkerhoff Avenue. In Brinkerhoff Avenue, nearly all of the buildings in that district are structures of merit designated by the city. Some are landmark eligible. In fact, the C2 zoning, which is inappropriate for this area, in my opinion, needs to be replaced as another work project for the city. The project is not in the Santa Barbara style in the broad sense. Unfortunately, in my observation, the ABR is trending away from its charge from some of the new buildings I've seen constructed. The proposed common area does not appear to be usable at all by the residents of the 2 proposed residential units. In the C2 zone, there is no setback required. It should be for residential areas. This should be remedied, but the proposed small area in which is basically in front of the commercial part of the building appears to be really unusable for the residents. There could be no children living here, apparently. It needs more amenities. There does not seem to be enough parking. This project, as previous speakers have said, would be jarring to the neighborhood.
I need to wrap up. I'm sorry.
Okay. This is an old residential area with many Victorians and bungalows. Downtown businessmen lived here. This can continue, but it needs good Santa Barbara design and layout. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim Bynack, followed by Kellum DeForest.
Members of the Commission, I'm Tim Bynack. Just as a way of introduction, I own 2 parcels on Brinkerhoff Street. I was one of the proponents, along with my wife, for the Landmark District, a historic district. We came to the city under ex-Mayor Lodge's tenure and stood here at 20-some years old and said we'd like to have this since we came back from back east, and we saw Select Hardware put up their box that went up on Delavina, and that's an eyesore, and this particular structure will be an eyesore also. I oppose the project and support the appeal. You don't see the Bynack family's been here for quite some time. We have a lot of projects. We have 2 Santa Barbara Beautiful Awards. I have a Green Award for 1020 State Street. I have the first living roof, I think, in Santa Barbara. I'm building a 2-story building right now that is straw bale. I live in a straw bale house. I live on an organic farm. So we know something, I think our family knows something about greenness in this community. This is just a tricky little put together with solar on top. Those hedges at 2.5 feet are going to die. They're not going to have enough light when the next building goes up. So I oppose the project. I would hope that Mr. Lack would go back to the drawing board, go back to the neighbors, and figure out what is compatible with the Bradbury neighborhood. If you, as I saw plans and as I looked at the street, everything on that side of the street has setbacks, has greenery. This just is going to jut out. You create a canyon on Chapala Street. You blocked our view as far as Brinkerhoff is concerned towards the mountains. I hope that you do not create an island as far as this part of the community is concerned by putting big buildings all the way around the Landmark District. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Kellum DeForest, followed by Mark Maislin.
Good afternoon. I am not a neighbor, but I am a preservationist wanting to preserve what's left of Santa Barbara. As you well know, it was the too big, too bulky structures that were approved for Chapala Street that has caused the citizens of Santa Barbara to say enough is enough. It is the reason for Proposition B. This building, although they could have come in with 60 feet. I know they couldn't have gotten away with that, but it definitely is too bulky, too big for the neighborhood. It's too big for any neighborhood, except possibly a strictly commercial neighborhood, which this should not be. All the bells and whistles of photovoltaic cells and green roofs don't negate the fact that the building is, again, I say, too bulky for the neighborhood. Where is the front yard? Please uphold the appeal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mark Maislin, followed by Steve Yates. Please correct my pronunciation of your
it's
name.
Mark Maslin, and I live at 114 West Coda Street.
Thank you. Welcome.
My property is, my address is on Coda, but
can you raise the mic up, please?
But
Thank you.
150 feet of my property is along Bradbury Street, on the corner directly across from the Redwood Inn. My property abuts the bungalow court that you saw in the slide up on the screen. I'd actually be very grateful if we could have a picture of the plan that we had up there just before it blacked out that shows the setbacks. I'd like to say something about that. First of all, I want to say I've lived at this property since 1999. I remember that. That's great. I remember that when I bought the property and moved in, I went to the lumber yard and I met a gentleman who was born on Ortega, just about a block from where I lived, and he said to me when he found out that I just bought this house, he said, "Oh, you're the future of that neighborhood," and I'd like to think that that's true, and that this is not the future of the neighborhood. I'd like to disagree with the architect's claim that the neighborhood is run down. I resent that as somebody who's put about $100,000 worth of work into my home, which has left it less than 50 feet from this lot over the last 10 years, including a new foundation. The neighborhood is not falling apart. The Redwood Inn is not falling apart. The cottage next to the property, which you have a model of there, is in exemplary condition. I'm just going to read to you very quickly a bit of the letter that I've submitted. Anybody who saw the story poles for this project, and I'm going to emphasize that the Architectural Board of Review did not see those story poles because they were not informed that they were put up. Anybody who saw the story poles would be able to see that the proposed structure is entirely out of scale with its surroundings. The building would loom over surrounding residences, both because of its height and because of its virtually setback-free bulk. I want you to think about whether you would like to live next to this building in that cottage with that setback, with that 12-foot fence, because people live there. These are your fellow citizens who live in this neighborhood. There's simply nothing else on the west side of Bradbury, and nothing at all with a Bradbury address that fills out its lot so entirely as this project will. It will set an irreversible precedent for transforming this block from a neighborhood into a business district. It will topolicize Bradbury at a stroke. The staff report considers such a transformation consistent with the general plan, but general plans are mutable, and residents, property owners, and voters have made their opposition to such a transformation more than audible. I think we're at a tipping point in Santa Barbara in this regard, and you should take that into account. The general plan is nothing more than an instrument of the citizenry. The views of the citizens in the immediate area of this project are clearly opposed to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we'll have Steve Yates, followed by Andy Rotman.
Good afternoon. My name is Steve Yates. Welcome to the future. This property is not in El Pueblo Viejo or any other historic district, and it is in a C2 zone, and a number of citizens are calling for a downsizing in areas like EPV, and that is going to bring this kind of a project before you time and time again on project-by-project basis. So it's something that we really need to look closely at. This is the type of pressure that is probably going to be created. Having said that, I'm looking at in looking at the appeal, I think there is one objective and substantive issue related to the technicality of the open space, and there's one aesthetic and subjective issue to be discussed. In terms of the open space requirement, there is no setback requirement in this C2 zone. Many of you have been involved in form-based discussions, and the architect has designed a form-based solution for this site, and they voluntarily set back the buildings and therefore created an opportunity for open space. I hardly think it's right to penalize them for that when they quantitatively meet the open space requirements. So that just leaves us with the question of aesthetics. This building, I understand, is under 30 feet tall. I think the architect has introduced some very important sustainable principles to the project that will be required in order for us to meet our Plan Santa Barbara sustainable goals. So I'd very much encourage you to deny the appeal. Thank you.
Thank you. Andy Rotman, followed by Elizabeth Fuero.
Hi, I'm Andy Rotman, and I'm at 109 West Ortega. And it's curious that everyone is attacking this project not for the open space requirement modification, which is what's being appealed, but for the mass bulk and scale of this building, which wasn't a planning commission issue. It seems to be off track. I understand that they're unhappy. They went through ABR. ABR did approve it, yet we have only one member from ABR come forward and point out his views on it because he was in the minority and not in the majority. They went through all that stuff. But the thing is that Brinkerhoff wants to say this is part of Brinkerhoff, but it's not. And you can tell by the passion of all the people from Brinkerhoff that they're not going to try and change their neighborhood, besides the fact that they can't because they've already put it in a special district. So I don't understand why Brinkerhoff is saying that this is going to impact Brinkerhoff, because it's not in Brinkerhoff. In fact, it's 260 feet away from Brinkerhoff Avenue, not the 100 feet that they're talking about. As I now know, the Redwood Inn pulls it over there, but it's the majority of the ones on Brinkerhoff are 260 feet from the closest point of the property to the closest point on Coda Street, adjacent to Brinkerhoff. So I'm just really confused about all the arguments here, because I thought the only thing here would be whether or not they could have a little bit reconfigured size of open space, common open space, which is for them, not for the whole neighborhood to enjoy. As I said, I'm right around the corner from this. Is it my cup of tea? No, but it's within the rules of Santa Barbara for what it's supposed to look like. It's going to be good for the environment, and I'm in support of the project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Elizabeth Farrow, followed by Robert Lavernos. Elizabeth, are you here?
She left.
Oh, she had to leave. Okay, I know that she's from St. Francis Pet Clinic, it says on there. How about, come on up. Please come on over here to the Shirley.
We'll turn on this microphone over here.
Oh. Thank you. Sorry. I didn't know how to do that. Okay. Whereas the model...
Just have a seat and you can speak into that microphone. You're all set. He may need some help, though. Yeah, he needs a microphone.
Very much to say at this point, but I would like to show these. The model is not put together as it should be right now. They're not. So here, that shows you what exactly the little house next door is, and can I be over here too? Or? Yeah. Thank you, Tim. And then there's just several shots of it that are quite... That is the space between the 2-foot eaves on the house. Will this focus better? Or is this it?
Keep going. You're fine.
Okay. I think that illustrates where they are. There's 22 feet to the front of the house. And the proximity is as it shows. This shows, again, straight, just dead ahead elevation. And here's more. And this is getting redundant, but that's the salient thing, I believe, that is very important. There is no way I can justify this. There's the little house next door. It's 17 feet at its greatest height in the center. And that's enough of this. Here's the back. The other part, everyone seems to be concerned about the front, and it's been lowered a little bit, and it isn't as aggressive as it was when it first started, but here's the back side. And it's true, the windows are drawn on instead, but they're recessed things are minimal. There is, at this point, as I heard last time, they are on the line and they're hoping to get that strip behind them, and then they're going to plant it and do things. Now, I don't think they've achieved that yet. There's a little no man's land strip back there, but to this point, and there we are. Okay, it certainly gives you a good idea. Could I set? Well, I don't even have to. You can see could you set it up right or?
Yeah, we've seen it. It's fine.
Well, no, it's kind of backwards, but anyway. Okay, turn it right around. Could you turn it right around so us folks can see it? All right. I did take pictures of the story poles.
You've got about 10 seconds, so.
Oh, okay, I'll hurry.
Thank you.
Here are some story poles. I took those pictures. No one else saw them except, I believe, Sherry. Here's the other ones. Another view of. So the story poles were photographed, not very successfully, by the people who did it, because they didn't even get most of them there to look at them. But they're true and real. This is Delavina. And from Delavina, see the pole on there are three poles. The one on the left and the one on the right are story poles, and the other one is an antenna. So that's what you see from Delavina. And this is, whoops.
Last picture, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. So there are pictures of the, even though they weren't made manifest.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir, your time is up. Thank you.
Yeah, I never want to be over.
We have one other speaker, Mike McCormick. Come on up, sir. And he's our last speaker. And then the matters to the commission.
My name is Mike McCormick, and I'm speaking to you, the commissioners, in support of this project. I support the approval of the modification granting the common open space to be located in the front yard of the proposed project. That's what I believe is the subject of this hearing. This modification is consistent with the purposes and intent of the zoning ordinance because the usable common open space is provided in a location found to be acceptable by the ABR. This project is also consistent with the City of Santa Barbara zoning ordinance and general plan. And its proposed use is consistent with the vision for the west downtown neighborhood of the general plan. It complies with all provisions of the condominium ordinance, and that the project was found consistent with the policies of the city's general plan, including the land use and housing elements, and that the ABR found the architecture and site design appropriate. Where does this appeal have any merit? Let's face it, the appellants are opposed to the intent and stated policies of the city's general plan. The zoning use is permitted and their own personal distaste of the design of the proposed project. That does not qualify them to stall this project anymore. If they don't like those policies, I suggest they work towards their modification, not against the legal right of the applicant. Please consider the tireless effort and continuing costs while cooperating with staff and the various review agencies that have all had an opportunity to look, change, and judge approval to this approval project. I'd also like you to consider the prior condition and use of the property and what it had been. Perhaps you don't know. Perhaps these neighbors would welcome back a modification of that way of what it was used for before, like a medical marijuana dispensary, for which this property is also eligible. Citizens who have strong feelings in opposition to the personal tastes of others and their legitimate selfish interests should have become commissioners themselves so that they can make decisions pro and con like you can. It is not fair to come in at the last minute on a process that has been more than 2 years in the pipeline. This is not the Miramar Hotel or the La Entrada project. This is a 2-unit residential commercial project in a neighborhood in transition. The property directly across the street is a huge commercial operation of Frazee Paint. I urge you to rise above the emotions from one neighborhood group trying to impose their influence on the plans of another. There is disconnect between the two. They are unrelated in use, physical appearance, and value. As far as I know, and I wasn't here earlier, I didn't know that anyone from the block of Bradbury themselves had opposed this project.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I'll just read these names into the record real quickly. Theoni Condos. That would be, yep, that's the name of it. Barry Dubin. John Vossi. Naomi Kovacs for CPA. Barry Winnick. Several people from the neighborhood on a petition. People we've heard from. Judy Arias. Carolyn Vasallo. James and Kathleen Smock. Jeannie, oh, we already heard from her. And AB Design Studios. All right, thank you. You have these correct? Thank you. All right, matters to the commission. Questions? Ms. Jacobs,
Thank
followed
you, Chair
by Mr.
Larson.
Joseph.
We're doing questions first and then comments later. Okay. I have a question about the proposed common open space and the dimensional requirements. Does it meet the dimensional requirements for minimum? It's either 20 feet or 15. I know it's in conflict and needs a modification for its location in the front yard, but I wanted to know if there was an issue with the actual dimensional measurements.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Jacobs, it sort of depends on how you look at it.
There's only one way to look at it,
Well,
it's numbers and measurements.
No, trust me.
All right, prove it. Come on, let's see it.
If we can bring that up, what the applicants had proposed include the green and the red area, and if you take those two combined, then yes, it does meet the 15 by 15. It's way more than that, in fact. But what the staff hearing officer approved did not include the red area; it only included the green. So that is less than 15 feet wide. It's about 12. It's about 12 feet wide, about 22 feet long, something like that. So, yes, that land is all there. It's all usable, but that isn't what that 15 feet width isn't what was approved by the staff hearing officer.
The staff hearing officer's decision to subtract the walkways, that's in keeping with the intent of the ordinance. I mean, walkways and especially driveways are able to be subtracted from proposed open space.
Madam Chair, I would say that the staff hearing officer and me as a staff person are in disagreement about that, because if you read the language of the ordinance, it says walks are allowed to be counted towards the 15 by 15. But I'll let the staff hearing officer explain her own.
Thank you, Mr. Cato.
Ms. Ridden.
Chair Larson, Commissioner Jacobs. The reason why I netted out the walkway is because it's a main walkway into the residential units. It's different than just a walkway along the property. So I didn't feel it was consistent with the purposes and intent of the zoning ordinance to include the main walkway. But when you do the multiplication, you multiply the area out, it still exceeds the area that is required, the 15 by 15 square foot area, because it's about 12.5 feet by 22 feet. So the total area excludes it, but what the relief it was asking for is for the dimension and for the location.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Justice.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got a couple of questions for staff. First one, the staff report and the staff presentation focuses on the modification and also to some degree on neighborhood compatibility. Now, I don't have my zoning ordinance in front of me, but my recollection is we do need to make a finding of neighborhood compatibility and sound community planning with regard to the Subdivision Map Act. This is an issue that was raised by several members of the public, so I need to know where the boundaries are as far as our decision making here.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Josephs, the finding that you have to make, I want to read from it exactly. It's contained in the Staff Hearing Officer Resolution 06209, which is Exhibit A, page 2. So pages 2 and 3 have the findings, and the only place where the finding, it doesn't even say neighborhood compatibility, but it's finding C3 under new condominium development. And it says that the proposed development is consistent with the principles of sound community planning and will not have an adverse impact upon the neighborhood's aesthetics, parks, streets, traffic, parking, and other community facilities and resources. There's no specific finding of neighborhood compatibility. That's the only finding that there is of the required findings.
Okay, that's very helpful. I'm also confused about the status of the rear property line, whether it extends into that parcel that's unaccounted for, or where that property line is, and it relates to the buffer between the rear yard and the adjacent property fronting De La Vina.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Justice, my understanding from a discussion with real property is the property line is this dashed line here right at the back of the building, as shown on the site plan. There is this strip of land here between these two dashed lines that apparently when the block was originally subdivided, they measured from the corners of the street 100 feet in and 50 feet wide for each parcel, and did not realize that there was this gap in the middle of the lot. So the original owner that subdivided the land would still own that strip of land unless it has been sold off otherwise. My understanding is these property owners are going to attempt through quiet title to obtain that strip of land, but I don't believe that has been completed at this time.
Is that a proposed condition of approval? Or I don't think it can be. I wouldn't think you could mandate negotiation with a separate interest.
Madam Chair, sitting here right now, I don't know how that would play out, and I would not recommend that as a condition of approval,
I'm not
particularly
going there.
given the fact that the zoning does not require a setback in this location.
Right. Thank you. Last question is, this went to ABR, I guess it was 5 times. Is there a particular reason it took this amount of review to get to the point where it got to the staff hearing officer?
The first 2 visits were with a previous designer. Was a very different approach to a green building. They heard it loud and clear, and they went to ABD Design Studio, and you can see in your submittal plans that they have the 3 iterations that they have progressed through their reviews with ABR. The minutes that are in your packet do reflect the summary motion, not every single aspect of the discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Justice. Commissioner Lodge.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. It slipped by me. The highest point on this building is, I know the architect mentioned it.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Commissioner Lodge. The top of the parapet on the upper story is 29 feet 8 inches.
Okay, so it's under 30 feet.
It's under 30 feet, and the roof level is below that because the parapet actually comes up 30 inches.
Okay, and you said a couple of times that the plate heights are 8 feet.
8 feet on all floors except for the garage, has to be higher than that for ADA accessibility.
Thank you. And I have a question, I guess, for staff perhaps. The Commission recently approved a project on Los Aguajes, which also has some green roof area, and this property does too. And or maybe this question needs to be answered by the architect as well, but I assume this is grass or plants that have to be watered. I know there was reference to drainage off of it, and I wonder what is the environmental benefit of having a green roof, and what about the impact on water supplies?
Commissioner Lodge, I'll go ahead and attempt to answer all your questions regarding that. Similar to the Los Aguajes project that you saw on September 3rd, I believe, we're also proposing a vegetated roof, which is a tray system, which would be propagated nearby and put on the site. And essentially, if you could just bear with me for a second, it's a 4 to 6 inch pan that comes in a variety of dimensions, and they get installed, and they're pre-grown, and they're actually locally grown, and they are a variety. It's not grass per se, because you'd have maintenance issues with that, but you can do a variety of things, succulents and other types of plantings that will do very well in those types of situations. The reason why we wanted to do green roofs, and the reason why green roofs and vegetated roofs are valuable and why you're going to see more of them, I think, is it cuts down on the heat signature of the building. It's a great insulation for the building itself, so that reduces in material costs and heating and HVAC systems as well. It also, on our project, we paid a lot of attention to really designing green roofs and planters into the building, and that had to do with your other comment about water collection. So as it rains, which we get some rain in Santa Barbara, but we know that we don't get a lot. But as it does rain, it comes down, it would collect in the trays, and over time, over saturation, it would seep out and then it would filter. So as the water gets filtered and hits the site, we're actually putting clean water back into the water table. And that's the idea behind the green roofs and the vegetation and the water management, stormwater management.
Okay, but you're suggesting that there's not... I still assume that there would, since we don't get rain ever, or really measurable amounts of rain for at least half the year,
yeah,
I imagine that would have to be watered.
Yes, great question. Our intention is to use more of a succulent type, which is a low water use, so that we don't impact, we're going LEED platinum here, so we don't want to do something that's going to, we don't want to put a grass lawn on the roof because that requires a ton of water. That would be against the theory of vegetated roof, yes? So we're doing a roof system that would be low water consumption, low water use, and would be something that would grow and sustain itself and not be overgrown and need a terrible maintenance.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Lodge. Anything else? All right. Then are we ready for comments? Oh,
I do have another question.
Sure.
This definitely is for staff. Isn't the modification is also for the location of the open space, and isn't the purpose of this open space for the residents to use to recreate in, or please explain?
The common open area, which is a 15 by 15 dimension, the new ordinance language writes that it is not to be located in the front yard. That is part of the reason why I got the modification. It's also the dimension. This 15 by 15 area could be located on a roof. It could be on a second floor deck. It does not have to be on the ground, but it can overlap with the 10% that's on the ground. So that's what they've chosen to do. And my staff report refers to this. If they did put it on the roof, it would eliminate some of the sustainability. It would add height with guardrails or possible other amenities that would be on the roof. That's, again, why they chose to put it on the ground. There was another part to the question, and I'm sorry it skipped my mind.
About the purpose of it, but from what you've said, I think
it's for recreation, and it could be a barbecue area. It could be an area where kids, if there were kids here, could ride their bike or just play ball in that area. It does serve that purpose.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody ready for comments? Ms. Jacobs.
Thank you, Chair Larson. First, I want to commend the neighbors for being persistent and for showing up at the various review meetings and for organizing yourselves and signing a petition and submitting letters. It takes a lot of work, and I commend you all for sticking with it this far and bringing to us really very good comments and very well-studied comments on the application at hand. For the record, the ordinance language is very specific. It says that the common outdoor living space shall be a minimum dimension, it says 20 feet, and also that it shall not include any portion of a front yard. It's really clear language. And,
Madam Chair?
Yes?
I believe you're reading method B, which is they're choosing method A, which is the private outdoor space method, which has 3 components. So the common open space is a 15 by 15 in the ordinance.
It's 15 by 15, but it's still very specific on not the front
Correct.
yard. I mean, it's clear as day. There's no doubt about it. So the application we're being asked to consider, we're being asked to make findings for the modification, but also there's the tentative subdivision map and the new condominium development. All of these were part of the package. And the findings are in our staff report on pages 2 and 3 that we're being suggested that we might agree with or not. We've talked a lot about Bradbury. I found Bradbury kind of by accident. A couple months ago, I was going down Delavina Street, and I passed the address I was looking for, and since Delavina is a one-way street, I had to use an alternate block to turn down and get back to where the address was that I wanted to reach. And I turned onto Bradbury, and I said, oh my God, this is a beautiful little neighborhood. I never knew this was here. Trees, setbacks, little cottages that obviously have businesses operating in them. It's really charming, and it definitely stands out from some of the neighborhoods that we would say are not historic or don't have charm or don't have character. This street has a lot of character. It might not be Brinkerhoff, it might not be the upscale kind of character that Victorian historic district has, but it definitely has character. And I'm puzzled that the ABR could find this project to be consistent with the existing development on this street. Our urban design guidelines say it has to be consistent with what's on the ground, with the existing neighborhood, and I don't see that this meets that compatibility standard in any way. And one thing that I read in the staff report and I hear from the report is this idea that it's a neighborhood in transition. That transition word can be very persuasive. When I read the general plan, I see something just a little bit different from what I think staff is promoting in this particular sense. There's a difference between being a transitional neighborhood and being a neighborhood in transition. A transitional neighborhood can be the same for 100 years as this one has been. It steps between a residential neighborhood and a commercial neighborhood. It can be a transitional neighborhood just like it is. It's fine. To say that it's in transition is to promote the idea that there's some manifest destiny for what this property ought to be, that it's in transition to something bigger, bulkier, denser, and more commercial. I don't agree with that use of the word. So just from a discretionary point of view, maybe that's what the ABR was persuaded by, but I'm looking at compatibility with what's there right now. I intend to uphold the appeal and deny the project, and I would further recommend that should this project come back, that it receive a courtesy review by the HLC, since it is nearly adjacent to the Brinkerhoff district and to the EPV. And I further recommend that story poles be mandatory. The fact that we were not able to see story poles and that they weren't really included in the staff report per se is worrisome to me on a project that is so out of scale with its immediate neighborhood. So I will not be able to support the project, and I will be upholding the appeal.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobs. Ms. Lodge?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I could make it very easy for myself and say simply I concur with Commissioner Jacobs' remarks, but I would like to add a little to that. I appreciate that the applicant has looked at least the house across the street, which is a Victorian craftsman-style house, and has used some of the same materials. But somehow it just doesn't work. I have some examples. I don't know, they may speak against me. Suzanne, do you have my flash drive there? These are photographs from trips in Europe. And the photograph on the building on the left, upper left, yeah, why don't you stay there? In particular, it's clearly a contemporary building. It uses the same materials as the building next door, and it works. I think it fits. And then, if you could scroll down, Suzanne, the building on the right, well, it's hard to see in this photograph, but again, it uses the same materials, but it, again, is clearly contemporary. And it can be done, is all I'm trying to say. The example on the lower left is a little harsher, but again, here with projecting balconies and the use of arches, it softens the effect so that it's more tied in. Well, as you can see, the ones on the left are from Amsterdam, and the ones on the right are from Bruges. So I think it can be done. It's not that I personally am against contemporary architecture, but this may be a neighborhood in transition, but the transition, as someone said, has a very harsh edge. It needs to be much gentler. And it needs to have, in some way, really more genuinely reflect the character of the neighborhood. One gentleman spoke to, well, you know, these are the person designed this building all within the rules. That's true. But that doesn't mean that we have to approve it just because it fits within the rules. Then we would have, you know, Santa Barbara would lose its character entirely if we did that. Fess Parker spent 7 years in front of us till he finally learned that we meant it when we said it had to be in Santa Barbara scale and style. So, you know, I feel it's unfortunate that the applicant is going to have, you know, at least if the vote is to grant the appeal, that he has to go back. But this just does not fit in the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lodge. Commissioner Justice?
Madam Chair, I didn't even have my light on.
I got your ESP.
I presumed that I was going to have some comments.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Do you?
I do.
I thought you might.
I do.
Thank you.
First, it's really interesting testimony today. Part of my concern is that I heard an edginess as far as folks from both sides of the aisle here trying to second guess the intentions of the other side. And today we're being confronted with a lack of civility from sports to other areas, and I look to the applicant as having good intentions, trying to put forth a good project, and I look to the folks who spoke today from the neighborhood as having good intentions and wanting to make sure that the project fits into their neighborhood as best as it can. And I'm going to try to make my comments in that light. And I think starting off, one of the first things that caught my eye in reviewing this staff report had to do with the nature of the Bradbury Avenue area. And it's a mixed bag. On the east side, you've got Frazee, you've got Dudek, you've got a hodgepodge of architectural features that are the back end of commercial uses on Chapala Street. And that carries with it a certain style or lack thereof. And then just across the street, you've got this the Bradbury block face, which is very, very different and reminiscent of the way the Lower West Side used to be many, many, many years ago. And the general plan speaks to this as a transition area. And I think Ms. Jacobs referred to this, but it said that As such, it needs to be of low intensity and suited to the transition area, talking to the issue of development. So I'm putting that in the mix. I look at the project, and I think Mr. Yates was very provoking in his comments that this, in many cases, is the future of some development happening in Santa Barbara. And I want to congratulate the applicant for going to the nines in terms to their green building design. I think you look at this project, and I understand very clearly the thought and the extra effort and the extra cost that goes into designing a building like this. So coming in the door, it's difficult to take a project like this and say, no, I don't like it, because it has a lot of the sustainability principles that we've been talking about as part of the general plan update, and we've been warming up to as a new way of thinking in smart growth. As far as the future development and the compatibility issues, this issue of, as staff indicated, the finding that the proposed development is consistent with the principles of sound community planning and will not have an adverse impact on the neighborhood aesthetics, that's the part where I get stuck, and I try to figure out how to balance these two. And I'm worried about making a mistake here and ending up with a project that just simply doesn't fit into this neighborhood, as schizophrenic as it may be, fronting both sides of Bradbury. And I don't see, I do see that while well-intentioned, this project does maximize development on the site at the expense of neighborhood compatibility. And so I'm having difficulty getting to that finding. Not that I don't think that we might be able to get there in some way, shape, or form, but I think that the structures on the east side of Bradbury are clearly commercial. They've always intended to be commercial, and on the west side there needs to be some attention in terms of land use compatibility to the single-story setback nature of those residential uses, which admittedly are in a C2 zone. But it's a transition zone, so I don't feel that building out the project to the property lines or close to there leaves me with the ability to make this finding number 3. So I cannot support the finding to approve the project because of those things. But the next question is, what do you do about it? How, if there's not a support on the commission for the applicant's proposal, as we see, how do we give productive and constructive decision as to what might be approved? And I look at the way the buildings are set back, the plan line of the street, and all the other buildings are well in from the sidewalk. And the applicant is shaking his head and disagreeing with me, and we may have a disagreement there. But I look at the exhibit that was sent around that shows building footprints, and there's one other building that jets out close to the sidewalk, and the other 2 or 3 between this are in fact behind that sidewalk quite a bit. I would like to see a stepping back of this structure that is adjacent to the sidewalk much further to be more compatible with that. The other setbacks of the surrounding structures, I think it needs to be of smaller scale. I think the 2 bedrooms, while an appropriate marketable unit, are still too large, and I think some scale and bulk can be reduced by reducing those bedroom sizes. I'm not an architect, so I'm not going to comment on the architecture, but it does stick out as being drastically different from the surrounding uses. And as a result, I think there needs to be a softening of this project. I think there's an approvable project here, but this is far too large to get me to the point where I could say it's an approvable project today. Although it's a sustainable design, a lot of thought has gone into it. The Achilles heel for me is the compatibility issue and the aesthetics of the project.
Thank you, Mr. Joseph, and it's the same for me. I can't make a finding of neighborhood compatibility. So, but I do love the green aspects of the project. So, yes, we need a motion, please.
Madam Chair, I'll give a try at a motion. I move that the Commission uphold the appeal and deny the project. And as an aside, recommend to staff that if the property be resubmitted with a new project, that the HLC be given a courtesy review.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. No, please do not applaud. We're not about that. We cannot do that in this room. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
And, pardon me?
Madam
Mr.
Chair.
Vincent?
Oh, no, it's me. Oh, do you have something?
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, while I understand the motion, I was going to attempt to comment. The story pole designation is really not an appropriate topic for a motion. It was part of your aside. It's hard to distinguish from a motion if as you state your emotion.
Oh, no, Mr. Vincent, the motion was to uphold I have it written down.
Okay.
Uphold the appeal, deny the project, and recommend to staff that should the project applicant come back, that a courtesy review by HLC be suggested.
Oh, I'm sorry. That too. This commission doesn't dictate or designate which review bodies see which projects. The HLC's purview is decided by the charter and by the zoning ordinance, actually by Title 22. I understand the intent and the goal here, but I just don't see this commission's purview as telling which design review bodies are to hear projects. That's in the municipal code.
Okay, I think we've done it before, but I would be willing to withdraw the recommendation from the commission that was a suggestion and a motion for reconsideration. And I would restate the motion as upholding the appeal and denying the project.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Joseph.
I think we have to break this one into pieces.
Okay.
The commission has taken a vote, so a motion to reconsider. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Vincent, but if we're going to change our motion that's been approved, we have to first vote for reconsideration and then entertain either a new motion or a modified motion. I could use some help on this one.
Sure. Any member of and since it was a unanimous vote, any one of you may make a motion right now, if you wish, for a motion for reconsideration. If it's seconded and supported, then you would simply make a new motion, or you take any action in reconsidering that first action. So, if that helps.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Substitute motion, please.
Substitute motion that the commission uphold the appeal and deny the project.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Is this appealable?
Yes, this is appealable to the City Council.
The City Council within 10 days.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Mr. Cotto.
Now this is done, we're trying to, one thing we try to do as the staff is to try to take away a lesson for the staff and the staff hearing officer, and I'm not sure, I understand what you did and why, but from a staff hearing officer perspective, and from a staff perspective, we take a lot of stock, I guess, in what the ABR decision is, when they give us comments, and a lot of what we base our decisions on neighboring compatibility-wise is based on what the ABR tells us. In this case, the ABR, even though it was a split vote, did tell us that they found it compatible, and so we have a tendency to go along with that since they are the architectural experts. Do you have any advice for us?
Mr. Justice. And then...
Mr. Cato, I think this project denial hinges on interpretation of this finding number 3 under the new condominium development code section, which talks about the proposed development is consistent with the principles of sound community planning and will not have an adverse impact on the neighborhood's aesthetics. And it goes on to talk about that. And without wanting to set any new standards, as Mr. Vincent has cautioned us, I continue to believe that it would be helpful to follow up on the principles of sound community planning and have some examples as to what that might be. We began to nibble at this issue when the Commission, the ABR, the HLC, and the Council got together in July 18th of 2007 to deal with this issue, and it never went anywhere in terms of adding greater guidance and understanding of what those mean, because admittedly it's a subjective judgment, and I'm sure the findings were written to be subjective, but it would be helpful to have something to give us a little bit more to chew on when projects entail a judgment call and may have a number of elements of sound community planning embodied in the basic design or approach to the project, as this project did. So that's my nickel's worth.
Ms. Jacobs?
Mr. Justice reiterates what I wanted to make sure we hear clearly, and that has to do with that July 18th meeting 2 years ago. It may be appropriate to consider another such meeting. At that time, I'm sure you'll recall the ABR and the HLC and the Planning Commission convened, and the City Attorney's Office gave the Commission's guidance on their purview regarding discretionary findings of this sort. Since that time, there have been turnover in the ABR and the HLC and on our Commission as well. I think that it would be very good for all people to come to the table and have that discussion again with the City Attorney's Office, and in particular to review specifically the urban design guidelines, which are the primary framework for especially our downtown design and discretionary decisions and findings of compatibility and aesthetics. There's some very specific rules or guidelines in there, and I won't go into all of them, but that meeting, I think it's something that should be a regularly occurring event to remind the design boards of those guidelines, and the show obviously would be part of that as well.
Thank you, Ms. Lodge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Although I wasn't on the Planning Commission at the time, I was at that meeting, and the main thing I carried away from it was the city attorney saying to all of these review boards and the city council, you can say no. Right? And just a comment on what happened at the ABR over time, from the comments that the representative from the ABR made earlier today, I got the impression that, well, it came back and it was better. And so, okay, I'll vote for it. But it wasn't good enough, at least as far as this body was concerned.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Mr. Vincent.
I, too, was at the meeting. And, in fact, the lesson I take from today's hearing is actually that the system that came out of, and there was a system that came out of that meeting, the compatibility criteria that were adopted into both the HLC section and the ABR sections of Title 22 that bring forth a communication process between the ABR, the HLC, and the Planning Commission and City Council on the land use end worked. Now, does that mean that you come lockstep to the same decision? I never expected any process would come to that same conclusion. And what you saw today is simply a different body using the same facts coming to a different conclusion. The process that was put into place after that July meeting, I believe, worked today. And just because this body came to a different conclusion than a majority of the Architectural Board of Review, I don't think the process was broken. I think it worked. The information was communicated to you, and you made your decision. Whether the ABR members agree with you or not, that was your decision.
Thank you, Mr. Vincent. Any other comments? No? Does that help you out? Good. Okay. Then we're on to our administrative agenda. This is the boring part, folks. The really boring part. So if you want to stay, great. If you are done, super. So we'll start with the committee and liaison reports. Mr. Joseph.
Madam Chair, I was skipping around here and was just going to suggest that we continue the adoption of minutes and resolutions based upon the lack of a quorum to act on those today. I have no committee or liaison reports.
Thank you.
Of a quorum of people that were there to vote on them. Okay.
Ms. Lodge?
Well, if we're going to go on to committee to liaison reports. Okay. The Downtown Parking Committee didn't meet for 2 months in the summertime, but they did meet on the 10th of this month. And I find it quite interesting to go to see what the problems are. And one of the problems is that people are messier and less respectful of public property than they used to be. They haven't cut back on maintenance staff. They just have more problems with people, urinating in the stairwells. And, somebody can come by and say, why are you doing that? They don't care, which is an unfortunate, and some people just don't respect what's really their property. It's public property. Well, they're part of the public. And we have restrooms in those places, too, that are available to the public. The parking districts, some discussion about the Granada Garage, and the revenues are generally down as business is down generally downtown. Sales tax is down, and of course that ultimately affects the parking district as well. One thing that I wasn't aware of, the parking district supports the bus services in the city for downtown workers as a mitigation for the Granada Garage, bringing more people downtown in their cars. So that was of interest. And then they have been switching. I'm sure we've all noticed the switching over to the automated business, putting our parking little stickers in the tickets into the machine, and it figures out whether or not we owe money or not. And if we don't, the gate opens and we're on our way to go, which means that the kiosk staff doesn't have quite as much to do as they did before those. But one of the staff said that they will always have the kiosk staff because sometimes these things jam or there can be issues that need someone there. But the other thing that they said is they consider them ambassadors to the public. Often there are people parking in the garages who are from out of town, and they'll have questions about where this is or that is, and so that is part of their job, which I found of interest, to answer questions from the public.
Thank you very much. I often thought that it might be helpful if the city, maybe when we get some money, could get a steam cleaner after those stairwells.
You may have noticed today that the lower level at the parking garage at Ortega and Anacapa, the lower level was closed because they are in the process of steam cleaning it. But they can only afford to do it every so often.
Yeah, that's why.
And so they
understand.
They're at work on that.
Thank you. Any other liaison reports? Okay, staff hearing officer. That would be me, liaison. reports that the staff hearing officer met, and I believe everything was approved. I don't have the detailed report, but that's the brief one. Now,
Madam Chair,
yes.
I just wondered, for a while there were a lot of them that related to T-fire houses that had burned. Are those pretty much through the system, or are you still seeing more of those?
It's my understanding there's more to come. There wasn't a meeting this Wednesday. The prior meeting before was actually the first time in a long time I didn't have any on my agenda. And I know next week I do have one T-fire rebuild, and then 3 actually development projects, 2 condo conversions, and then a new condo development. So they kind of seem to come in waves. So I think there's still more out there.
Thank you. Now, Ms. Rodriguez, you asked us to consider the minutes of September 3rd. Is that correct?
Yes, Chair Larson. The Commission is correct in that there was not a quorum for reviewing and approving the minutes of August 20th. However, the full Commission was present for the meeting of September 3rd. So I ask for consideration of approving and reviewing those minutes and resolution.
And then were distributed those at this meeting?
The minutes were in your packet. The resolution was emailed, and I also provided additional copies today.
Okay, thank you. Is the Commission prepared to do this for the 3rd? Okay. Any changes, additions, deletions to the minutes of the 3rd?
Madam Chair, I have a question. Since I voted against the Los Aguajes project, can I vote against the resolution? Mr. Vincent's having to think about this one.
At this point, the only action that you're taking regarding the minutes and the motion are whether or not they are accurate representations of your action. The resolution itself does reflect your disdaining vote.
Okay.
Or
Thank
dissenting vote, excuse me.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
So move.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. And with that, I believe we're adjourned. Thank you.